Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It is with great pleasure and excitement that I'm opening today's webinar's Scholars as Peace Builders, Israel, UAE, and the Academy. I'm Dr. Shahar Sadeh, the Director of the Faculty Engagement Program at the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York. The Faculty Engagement Program goal is to create faculty-led nuanced discussions about Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on New York City campuses. Our program was established in 2014 on the assumption that scholars are critical agents in setting and facilitating public discourses, which sometimes are complicated and deal with uncomfortable truth, but scholars are also those who are well suited to envision and discuss scenarios for different futures, even if they may keep it on a theoretical level. Scholars have the privilege of thinking, and if they are able to live the publish or perish mantra, they can really think in creative ways that are not tied to political limitations. The known phrase that says politics is the art of the possible. Academics don't need to conform with just the possible and can, alongside good research, promote new ways of thinking and form new collaborations that transcend boundaries and political conflict. Over the last years, the Faculty Engagement Program led 8 study tours to Israel and the West Bank entitled Scholars as Bridge Builders, which among other things explore the current and potential roles of scholars in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We have held over 60 events on campus or online during the last few months that hosted Israeli and Palestinian speakers and was attended by thousands of people, and many other workshops and academic seminars. If anyone wants to learn more about our programs, we'll drop a link in the chat box in a few minutes. Today's event is in collaboration with the United Arab Emirates University and the University of Haifa. And we're going beyond our usual focus on the territory between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, following the great enthusiasm in which the Abrahamic Accords were accepted by many in the region. And indeed, we have people on today's webinar coming from all over the world, from Israel, the UAE, US, from academic institutions, NGO, local government, and more. Over the last few days, I've received an impressive number of questions from you, the audience, via email. Some questions were purely intellectual, but I have to say that most were practical questions asking, who should I call to create a research group? Who can I address to create a joint forum and a joint discussion? And I can tell that there is not only real intellectual curiosity to learn and better understand the academic scene in both countries, but also a great will to delve into the ways scholars can act to solidify it through actions in our classrooms, institutions, and overall enhancement of academic relations in both research and teaching. Our speakers will start by giving us an overview of their respective academic scenes and their vision for the path the Abraham Accord created for their institutions, as well as their 2 countries more broadly. Indeed, as soon as the Abraham Accord were declared, and even during the months leading up to them, a wave of unofficial and official ties between the countries flooded the region. Those spans from governmental relations to business ventures on a variety of issues such as energy, water, agriculture, artificial intelligence, and more. However, it seems that this collaboration and relationship building has not transferred as quickly to the academic realm, the one exception being the medical or scientific collaboration on COVID-19. While usually, as was the case in some of the previous peace processes, we expect academics to take a lead and push governments to reach agreement and promote peacemaking. It seems that in these negotiations, academics were not leading the way. We hope to explore today the reason if this is true and why this was the case, as well as the way we can move forward. We will discuss some of the different characteristics of the academy in Israel and the UAE, and in what ways this might affect a joint research, students, and faculty exchange. Lastly, we will discuss the role that Palestinian citizens of Israel can play in enhancement of these relationships. And given the many questions we have received from you, the audience, on the subject, we will touch the elephant in the room, if you will, and ask how can these academic relations impact the Israeli-Arab conflict in general and maybe the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in particular? Do they have a role in solidifying peace beyond the Abraham Accord? So now I want to quickly introduce our esteemed speakers. His Excellency Zaki Anwar Nusseibeh is the cultural advisor to His Highness the President of the UAE, Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and Chancellor of the United Arab Emirates University. He has continuously served in the UAE government since its formation in 1971, acting as the personal interpreter and advisor to His Highness the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, serving as the Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, where he established and managed the Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy. Professor Rouben is the president of the University of Haifa. He previously served as the Senior Vice Provost for Global Faculty Development of the New York University, overseeing the establishment of NYU international campuses in Abu Dhabi and Shanghai. Prior to his tenure in NYU, Professor Rouben spent 20 years teaching at the University of Haifa and served as the Dean of Students for 5 years. Each of the speakers will speak for about 12 to 13 minutes, then we'll turn to Q&A. Please use the chat box to send me your questions. With that, I give you Chancellor Nusseibeh.
Thank you very much. Good evening and good morning on this blessed day of Ramadan. I am delighted to be here with you all today, with educators, students, activists, and so many of you invested in a brighter future for our region. And I am thrilled to be here with Professor Rouben of Haifa University. Thank you to the Jewish Community Relations Council for inviting me to speak on the important topic of education and culture as channels to nurture regional relations, particularly between the UAE and Israel. Let me start with a few words on the UAE and our efforts on higher education and cultural partnerships. By global standards, the UAE is a young country. We celebrate our Golden Jubilee, our 50th anniversary, this year. Precisely because of our youth and entrepreneurial spirit, the UAE has become one of the key innovation hubs of the region, hosting global financial and trading institutions, cultural organizations like museums and universities, and even a major humanitarian logistics hub at Dubai International Humanitarian City. Notably, we have attracted people from all over the region and the world, with over 200 nationalities living side by side in the UAE. The UAE is also a popular destination for Arab youth. According to the 12th Annual Arab Youth Survey in 2020, 46% of all young Arabs named the UAE as their top country of choice to live in for the 9th year in a row. The basis to sustain such a diverse and dynamic society is by providing opportunities for growth and intellectual development. A critical element of this effort is the promotion of inclusion and equality in our higher education. Women make up 70% of all university graduates in the UAE, and 56% of all UAE government university graduates in STEM are women. The UAE takes pride in our diverse population and in our cultural and educational partnerships with countries and institutions all over the world. This includes hosting campuses of New York University and the Sorbonne University, and attracting thousands of students every year from all over the world. Cultural diversity in the UAE is based on the culture of coexistence and tolerance, which has become an integral part of government work. In 2017, the world witnessed the birth of the first Ministry of Tolerance in the UAE. In 2019, the UAE presented to the world the Human Fraternity document issued on the occasion of hosting the Human Fraternity meeting between His Holiness Pope Francis and His Eminence, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, in the presence of 900 spiritual leaders representing humanity's rich variety of religions and beliefs. And construction has been ongoing for some time of the Abrahamic family house in Abu Dhabi, a place of learning, dialogue, and worship, which will be inaugurated in 2022. The Abrahamic family house will be home to a synagogue, a church, and a mosque, which will all be connected by a beautiful garden to be for the first time a joint community in which the practices of exchanging dialogue and ideas between followers of religions are strengthened in order to promote the values of peaceful coexistence and acceptance of different beliefs, nationalities, and cultures. Our own university derives its values from the values of the UAE as a country that believes in peace, cultural diversity, and acceptance of others. And this is reflected in many aspects of the university, such as the diversity in our faculty in terms of nationalities, the universities from which they graduated, and their research interests, with members coming from more than 77 different countries, and where non-Emirati faculty members represent more than 60% of the total professors at the university. Also, the presence of more than 1,500 international students on our campus, and in our partnerships with international universities and research centers, where many professors conduct joint research with professors from different universities around the world. Promoting mutual understanding, stimulating intellectual curiosity, and building bridges is one of the foundations for the UAE-Israel Peace Accord. The accord was a historic diplomatic achievement to move our two countries forward into a new era of cooperation. In a region often besieged by conflict and humanitarian crises, two dynamic and advanced societies are working together to be a powerful engine of progress and opportunity, not just for the UAE and Israel, but for the entire region. And I would like to emphasize that our efforts to strengthen our ties with the Jewish people predates the historic peace accord, since the UAE has a flourishing, nascent Jewish community led by Chief Rabbi Sana, who also serves as the executive director of the Bronfman Center for Jewish Studies at NYU, and Rabbi Abadi. On the peace accord, we believe that the agreement is a breakthrough moment towards achieving peace and stability in our region, particularly with the halting of annexation, which was a part of the accord. The UAE hopes that this will create an opportunity for Israeli and Palestinian leaders to re-engage in meaningful negotiations that will realize a two-state solution in line with relevant UN resolutions and international law. And let me emphasize here that our peace accord goes beyond mere normalization. We want to build a warm peace and continuous exchanges, not only between our states, but between our people. We realize how vitally important is the role of the academy in promoting this ideal when it encourages, as it did in Plato's time in Athens or at the House of Wisdom in 9th century Baghdad, the acceptance of a diversity of perspectives and the discussion of alternative views so as to reach a clearer and more moral understanding of the great issues that challenge our societies. In the words of Maimonides, at times the truth shines so brilliantly that we perceive it as clear as day. Our nature and habit then draw a veil over our perception, and we return to a darkness almost as dense as before. So, for scholars seeking to build bridges, Maimonides teaches us that truth must be confronted and must not be ignored. This should be the guideline for bridging between an Israel with whom we are keen to normalize relations and an Israel that continues its occupation of Palestinian land. Are scholars from both sides up to the task? Haifa University is a perfect platform for encouraging its scholars to tread this path. With almost 30 to 40% of its student body being Palestinian Israelis, and its willingness to appoint Arabs in its highest academic and administrative posts, Haifa may have what it takes to encourage joint scholarly quests that do not draw a veil over our perception and that can use the normalization and Abrahamic Accords to help bring justice to be realized. We would like to see the UAEU play a similar role. We have already begun to see the fruits of our peace accords in our academies. The UAE's Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence and Israel's Weizmann Institute of Science have agreed to work together on advancing and developing artificial intelligence. This was the first memorandum of understanding signed between Israeli and UAE higher education bodies. We can expect more to come. So how can we help as universities to build tolerance through scholarship so as to build on our peace accords? Here are some examples, not an exhaustive list. Our universities can promote and support the recruitment of faculty and students from Israel and the United Arab Emirates. Our academies may collaborate in research and consultancy consortia, drawing on each other's resources and expertise to address common challenges of social and economic growth. We have the opportunity to organize joint conferences and symposia to share our resources. Our universities also have many international partnerships outside the UAE and Israel, both within the region and further afield. These connections are a resource we can draw on to enrich our collaboration. The disciplines represented across our universities encompass arts and humanities, and there is a wealth of artistic, linguistic, musical skill and talent in our faculty, staff, and student communities. The medium of culture presents itself as an opportunity to bridge communities and celebrate the multiple heritages, diversity of influences, and common interests we share. And finally, our curricula and campuses can deliberately form programs of peace and conflict education. Let me conclude by saying, it has been our destiny so far to live in a turbulent region besieged by conflicts, extremism, and humanitarian crises. Academic institutions will not be able to make conflict or differences disappear overnight as if by a magic wand. They could, however, play a critical role in helping us revisit our assumptions, consider innovative solutions, and highlight positive examples. They could help us perhaps have what it takes to encourage joint scholarly quests that can use the normalization and Abrahamic Accords to help the people in the Middle East shape a more just, more prosperous, and more peaceful future for all. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And shalom upon you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chancellor Nusseibeh. This was fantastic. President Rouben, please take it from here.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good evening. Ramadan Kareem to all our Muslim viewers. Chancellor Nusseibeh, I have a special greeting for you from Ambassador Al-Khaja, who says, please send my regards to Abu Anwar. I suppose that's you know him well. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you to the JCRC. Thank you to Chancellor Nusseibeh. For me, as you know, it's somewhat of a personal vindication, having spent such a long time in the UAE myself, and knowing that culture from very close by, I can ascertain that what you heard from Chancellor Nusseibeh is 100% right. I find it when I first got this invitation from you, Shahar, I was a little amused, scholars as peace builders, because we're probably the most contentious and disputatious people on earth, scholars are, I should say. And that's actually the reason why we are good peace builders, because we leave no stone unturned. Everything that is part of this bridge that we are building right now, we know is robust, it is solid, and it moves forward. And perhaps the best way for me to demonstrate this is to describe the University of Haifa as a microcosmos of what we are trying to do here together, two universities, two countries, bringing some semblance of peace and understanding to a very turbulent region, as described before. From our heading over here, from sea to space and beyond, I think you get a sense of where I'm heading. We do not recognize borders. We understand that to be good scholars, you have to basically ignore borders and bring different types of regions together, whether it's sea, space, and beyond. Those of you who are unfamiliar with the geography of the region, here we are in the northern part of Israel, a map from the 18th century. We are situated on the biblical Mount Carmel. You can see the tiny village of Haifa nestling at the bottom of the mountain, and across the bay, the Crusader city, the old city of Akko, the Crusader city of Akko. Haifa is different today. It is a bustling port city. Many of you probably know the city. It is not only a port city, it is the headquarters of a world religion, the Baha'i religion. The central temple is in Haifa. Across the bay in Akko, the Prophet Baha'u'llah is buried. And in that sense, Haifa plays an important part in religious reconciliation as well. Our campus, very briefly, here you see the numbers for yourself. I will point out two aspects of our campus which I think are important to bear in mind. Our physical presence. We believe very much in having a bricks and mortars presence in multiple locations. We know the value of virtual education, of online education, but we feel that it's very important to have a physical presence. As you can see from here, much of our physical presence outside of our main campus on the Carmel mountain has to do in one way or another with the sea. Another point that Chancellor Nusseibeh mentioned, we have 18,000 students. 40% of our undergraduates are Palestinian citizens of Israel, Muslims, Christians, Druze, and we are very proud of that. 30% of our graduate students belong to minority communities. That for us is our badge of pride, and you'll see as we move on here is an important sense of our identity. So for those of you who don't know our main campus, it is situated on about 500 meters above sea level. And we are situated at a place where we merge three different ecosystems. We have the mountains on in the middle of the national park here, where Africa meets Asia as far as the flora and fauna is concerned. In the midst of us, we have a vibrant high-tech scene and a meeting of cultures in the city of Haifa. And beyond us is our lifeline. It's the sea. The sea is our lifeline. It is the source of our potable water. It is the source of our energy. It will soon, due to climate change, be the source of our protein. Another view of our spectacular campus, main Mount Carmel campus, you can see over here from one of the drones that our computer scientists fly. The location is spectacular. The main Carmel campus is home to most of our faculties: law, social science, humanities, education. This building you see over here is from 1972. It was built by the famous Oscar Niemeyer. It is, you mentioned, Chancellor Nusseibeh, that this year you're celebrating 50 years of the UAE. Well, we have a celebration of our own. Next year, we will be 50 years old as a campus. And we look forward to having you as one of our guests, God willing, as of course, we move forward. We are now in the final stages of building a new campus, the Laurie Lockheed City campus. This is in the heart of the port. At steady state, this campus will have about 3,000 students. It will be our data science campus, close to where all the startups and high tech is in Haifa. It will have computer science, data management, statistics, and much more will be housed on this very, very vibrant and edgy part of the city. Young, vibrant, a meeting of cultures happens here on a daily basis. Not far from there, we are now establishing a new campus. This will be our campus of art and industrial design, the Colony campus. This is in the heart of the German colony, which I kind of consider to be Haifa's Brooklyn. It is young, it is full of cafes, it is a scene of cultural innovation from east and west, and it is a place that when you visit Haifa, I hope you have the time to visit this new campus of ours over there. And we look to the future, and I think this is the most important thing that I would like to focus on. This is the city of Akko. And in the city of Akko, we intend to establish a new campus dealing with the issues of global change, whether it's climate change, pandemics, and of course the sea, everything related to the sea. We feel that Akko is a perfect site for us because, like Haifa, there is a meeting of different cultures in the city of Akko. I think this meeting of different cultures has gained us worldwide recognition. Let me just give you a couple of very short examples. Our honorary doctorates. These, over the past 3 years, I will mention just a few names. You, of course, recognize Chancellor Angela Merkel, who received an honorary doctorate, Larry Bacow, the president of Harvard, a couple of months ago, and a year ago, the president of Yale, Peter Soloway, received a degree here. Not so long ago, of course, Irina Bokova, who is the Secretary General of UNESCO, also received an honorary doctorate. All of these people have acknowledged our diversity and our willingness to engage in dialogue across cultures as our strongest point here at the university. And this is what scholars do most. So we call ourselves not a university, we call ourselves a multiversity, because what we do here is multiple in any ways that you look at it. We have global scientific collaborations. We already have some nascent collaborations with the UAE, which we hope to expand in the not too distant future. We are a multiversity because, once again, we deal with the sea and land and outer space. But perhaps the greatest aspect of this is our diversity, our human diversity. When I'm next week in Abu Dhabi, I hope to be next week in Abu Dhabi and meet personally Chancellor Nusseibeh. We will talk more about these issues and how they may bring our two campuses together. I won't go over this entire list of selected projects. I'm just going to mention a few of them. The first one might strike you as a little strange: interspecies communication. Let me explain. We now have a team of marine biologists in the Caribbean, together with linguists and AI specialists from Harvard, MIT, Berkeley, and Imperial College. We are deciphering the language of humpback whales. We hope to be able to communicate between species as we move forward, and we are very proud of this particular aspect. The second issue that I'd like to mention very briefly is our archaeology, which is not really archaeology, it's bioarchaeology. You know, archaeologists like to go to sites and reconstruct buildings from past times. What our archaeologists do, they go and look for the dumps, the piles of refuse left by previous inhabitants, and they reconstruct from that the DNA of what people used to eat, what people used to wear, to get a sense of what other cultures were like in biblical times. And we use that, and I'm moving here to wheat evolution, to do genomic sequencing of crops, of flora and fauna from biblical times to present days. We are engaged in particular in wheat here, in genomic sequencing of wheat, all types of wheat from biblical times to the present, in order to construct, to reconstruct, or to remake a robust type of wheat that can live up to the type of climate change that will affect us all as we move forward. The very last issue on this table here is interfaith studies. As you can imagine, a university like ours is engaged very much in understanding the different fonts of wisdom that we can find in the different faiths that populate our campus. Under no circumstances do we think that we will all agree on all matters, but we do have to understand each other, and we put a lot of effort into that particular issue. So that, in a nutshell, is who we are. We are a campus of many cultures who have figured out how to live together and share knowledge. And as scholars, we join with the UAE and the world to share our knowledge and build bridges that somehow will supersede the type of differences that separate us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron, so much. This was, again, wonderful. We'll start with the questions, and everyone can still send your questions. I'll start with the first one that is addressed for Chancellor Nusseibeh, and it's about gender and women at the UAE. You mentioned that women constitute a distinct majority in the UAE public university. Is this majority reflected in the workforce? How does gender inform the way teaching takes place? And how can Israeli women create encounters with Emirati women?
Thank you. It's an important question. In fact, gender plays an essential role in our sustainable development strategies. And this is why women not only are a majority in our universities and higher education institutions, but also in the workforce. We have women, half of our National Assembly are women. The cabinet, in fact, the men in cabinet now are complaining that their places are being taken over by all the young and competent women graduates who come to work there. In society, women have always played an important role. And we have women even as fighter plane pilots. We have them in the army, we have them in the police force. So yes, I mean, women are a central part of our society. Sheikh Zayed, the founder of the UAE, saw that very early on, that in order to really create an environment for growth and social prosperity, we need to engage our women. How can Israeli women also cross with Arab and United Arab Emirates? But there are diplomats in the UN, where you are, Shahar. For my daughter is at the UN as the permanent representative of the UAE. We have them in our universities. And so in the future, as we discuss modes of cooperation between our universities, that should be something that is easy to organize. Thank you.
Okay, great. So a question for both speakers. While many of the classes in the UAE take place in English, this is not the case in Israel. And just some of specialized international classes are held in English. What does it mean for the chances of Israeli students, Hebrew or Arabic speakers, studying at the UAE? And what about Emirati students joining classes in Israeli institutions?
Well, let me just say a few words about our universities. Indeed, the language of instruction is Hebrew, but the number of classes that are taught in English is growing exponentially, and it has a lot to do, of course, with interest from international students. Most of a significant portion of courses in MA in areas which interest global students, not all the areas that we teach are of interest to global students, are taught in English. We are in the course of changing our instruction mode and having a number of courses in every discipline taught in English, both for our own students to improve their English, but also to attract international students. It's really a marketplace issue that you mentioned here, Shahar. The more interest we have from global students, definitely from students who come from the region, from MENA, the more courses we'll have in English and perhaps in Arabic as well. We are absolutely suited to providing courses in Arabic for students from the region as demand grows.
Let me add to President Robin's comments by saying perhaps this will be a motivation for both of our sides, students from both sides, to learn Hebrew and Arabic. After all, both languages come from same sources, and it shouldn't be all that difficult to pick up on language. But also, the UAE, of course, offers its courses in English at the UAE University, and we find that it works in order to attract an international cohort of students from across the world.
Thank you both. Another question for Chancellor Nusseibeh. With the signing of the Abraham Accord, the UAE lifted the long-time boycott on Israel. As you know, there are calls to boycott Israeli academics and Israeli academic institutions and not normalize relation with Israeli institutions as part of the Palestinian struggle and a way to influence Israel's practices and policy. What do you say to colleagues who call Emiratis to continue with this? And for President Rovin, I'll add another question. How do you handle boycott discussion on your campuses? If 40% of students are Palestinian citizens of Israel, how inclusive is it? And does it allow a real space for complicated conversation?
Well, thank you, Shafar. Let me start by saying I do not think that the boycott strategy has really influenced any party's policy or behavior in this dispute that has been ongoing, after all, for 100 years at least. So we do not believe in boycotts as the means, as a strategic, if you like, tool in order to impact policy. Now, other countries may believe in this, and of course they have the freedom of their choice and the freedom of their opinions. But we are hopeful that by lifting the boycott and in fact allowing for this flow of ideas and perceptions and narratives across the two sides, we can help in impacting policies far more than a mere boycott or living in a bubble and hoping that somehow this will bring about changes in a country's strategy or policy.
So Shahar, you mentioned in your introduction that once upon a time I was Dean of Students. I was in fact Dean of Students at this university during the Second Intifada, at a time when contentiousness on this campus was a daily occurrence. And I'm going to say the following, which I taught my students then, and I believe in this wholeheartedly. The easiest thing to do is to have conversations with like-minded people who think like you, look like you, and behave like you. This is not what we do as scholars. In our own work, we engage different theories that sometimes contradict our own work, and we have to somehow reconcile those differences. And in our politics and in our culture, the only way to move forward is to do similar things. And in the toughest of times, we've managed to pull this off on our campus over here. The issue of boycott comes up often. It comes up in our relationship with other universities. It comes up in internal discussions here. And like the Chancellor, I believe very wholeheartedly that shutting people up does nothing to reconcile differences. The only way to move ahead is to actually engage in difficult conversations and understand that there are different mores, there are different values that need to be reconciled. And the place to do that is most obviously academia, where we share certain values despite different politics, different issues of faith. The only place that it really works is in academia, and we are a shining example of how this can be done.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you for this answer. Chancellor Nusseibeh, contrary to Israeli academic institutions, the faculty in the UAE is internationally very diverse and hosts scholars from around the Middle East and the world. In what way is this conducive or harmful for bilateral collaboration? How comfortable do faculty members feel to lead discussions related to Israel, and do you feel a change in the last few months?
I believe it is changing, and not only over the last few months. I believe that more people are open to the idea that the old ways have not led us anywhere, and especially in academia. And I fully agree with President Robin's commentary on this. Especially in academia, we should encourage the creation, the promotion of an environment that allows for exchanges and the discussion of diversity, rather than close ourselves in echo chambers and only listen to ourselves. So how would faculty respond? I've already seen from the various contacts that have taken place in our own university, the UAEU and Haifa University. And this is on the level of researchers and deans and assistant deans. They are excited about the possibility to engage together, do research together in order to help each other attain the kind of objectives they want to get to. Now, will there be some opposition? Yes. I mean, this is an environment where we must, as I said, give space for different opinions to be expressed. But I believe that these changes are coming and that these changes are affecting the whole Middle East. You know, we all want in the Middle East in the end to live in peace. I think that people are tired of having to accept this as a beholden destiny, that we move from one war into the next. And I think, and I hope that as scholars, we can help promote the kind of space where this can be promoted and brought to, based, as I said, on also justice, because people must see in the end that there is justice that is realized by these open exchanges that take place between our scholars.
I'll say a word about globalization, or having a globally diverse campus, which is the essence of this question. So below the hill, directly below us, is one of the largest high-tech centers in the country at the entrance to Haifa. And every major multinational has a research and development center here. In fact, on our campus, IBM has its largest R&D center outside of the United States. And they are attracted to the city and to the two institutes of higher learning here, the Technion and the University of Haifa, because of the global nature of the way we teach here. It is true that most of our faculty are citizens of this country and don't have that huge variety that we see at the UAEU, but most of our faculty are educated abroad. And they bring up our students to think globally, act locally, think globally. I think that's the statement I would use. And it serves us well, and it will serve us well with our relationship with the UAE.
Fabulous. Another question, and the questions keep coming in. Regionally, by signing the Abraham Accord and by being such an important hub for regional development, the UAE might have or already has a seat at the table when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian negotiation. Do you believe Israeli, Palestinian, and Emirati scholars should form a direct channel of discussions on that subject matter?
If it helps, yes. I mean, and if I believe that it's again very important that scholars from different sides come together in order to discuss their viewpoints. Now, a number of UAE and Arab nationals who work and live in the UAE have a Palestinian origin, and they are happy and open in order to share in these discussions. So if it can help, I mean, scholars should do everything they can in order, I believe, to help promote the peace process as well.
So let me say a word about this, Shahar. Why the attraction of the UAE for a country like us and a university like us? Once upon a time, there were numerous capitals, idea capitals in the Arab world. Beirut was a financial center. Cairo and Baghdad were great centers of learning. Due to regional strife, much of the great work that we saw in these phenomenal cities has moved to the Emirates. Today, the Emirates is possibly the most important country in the Arab world, in MENA in general, Middle East and North Africa. For us to engage with the Emirates means to engage with the entire Arab world. It is represented in the people who live in the Emirates, and the level of influence that the Emirates has on regional conflicts like our own, which maybe the word regional is wrong. Its sure longevity has assured us that it's beyond regional conflicts, means that we need to engage with the UAE as much as possible. And I go back to the point that I made before. The place to start is in academia, because we know how to argue. We have a structured way of arguing. We have a structured way of reaching some sort of reconciliation. And so we are actually the best site to begin this.
Our last question before you have your concluding remarks. The global and local interfaith world is excited by this development you've mentioned. How do you see engaging these efforts to be part of the interfaith community?
You know, the document on human fraternity that was signed in Abu Dhabi in the presence of Pope Francis and the Sheikh of Al-Azhar, and in the presence of 900 spiritual leaders representing diverse religions and beliefs, in effect started this process, started a process where the different religions and sects and beliefs came to say, we respect one another. It's not a question of only accepting one another. It is not only a question of saying, we will talk with one another. It is actually to say that we respect one another. As one Hindu spiritual leader told the conference at the summit, and he said that we are all seeking the same truth, but every one of us may choose a different path to get there. I believe this interfaith dialogue, if you like, this idea that people can come together and show respect and acceptance for each other's beliefs will be a milestone on this path. And let me tell you, I mean, again, Sheikh Zayed, who I obviously was greatly impacted by his leadership, always used to say, nobody chooses his or her own religion. You are born into a religion. And therefore you become whatever religion you have in your environment. But we can judge people according to their actions. When they do good deeds, we consider them religious, and when they don't, we do not consider them religious. This is the true message, I believe, the true interfaith message that the UAE is sponsoring, and is hopeful that it will become a universal message as well.
So, this is a very good question. You may recall from Sigmund Freud, he spoke about the narcissism of small differences. Now, I'm not going to belittle the differences between the various religions in our region, But having said that, as scholars, as we go back to our sources, as we go back to the fonts of our faith, we find common denominators. And I think that is what the interfaith dialogue that we hope to promote will lead us. It will lead us to our common sources, and our common sources are very similar. And they have similar values, even as those values have changed over eons and have different forms that we might not recognize. Through scholarly investigation, we will find our common roots, and I think we will begin this process of finding an equilibrium in this region that will bring us all together.
Thank you both. With this, I'll give you some 2 minutes for final remarks and reflection, if you will, before we conclude.
Thank you very much then for this wonderful evening, and thank you also, President Rouben, for bringing so many insights into our discussions. I look forward to our meeting in Abu Dhabi next week. Now, for as long as I can remember, as a child in Jerusalem streets to my years in England and subsequent settlement in Abu Dhabi, I have witnessed an endless succession of conflicts, wars, and acts of brutal violence ravage the societies of the Middle East, bringing unbearable misery, suffering, and loss to the millions of its inhabitants. Even today, as we survey the region we live in, we continue to experience an environment of divisiveness, instability, and fear that nourishes conflict and dissent. The world, too, is becoming more and more polarized. In 2019, there were over 10 deadly attacks on places of worship around the world. And with the outbreak of COVID-19 in 2020, we saw the exacerbation of discrimination and xenophobia. However, the UAE is eager to promote cultural diplomacy, fostering mutual understanding through the exchange of art, ideas, and knowledge to combat these challenges. I hope all of you will have soon the opportunity to visit the Louvre Abu Dhabi. The collection draws attention to our universal history, highlighting the similarities and particularities of forms of artistic expression that surpass any geographical limitations. Universities, just like museums and other institutions, have an essential role to play in building bridges between communities and in helping us revisit our assumptions, consider innovative solutions, and highlight positive examples. Let me encourage students here at Haifa University and around the world to contribute to finding new solutions to some of the region's most intractable problems. The UAEU is very happy to salute the new relationship between the UAE and Israel, and we are looking forward to exploring the possibilities for collaboration. We remain committed to the spirit of friendship and motivated by the academic ethics of collegiality, curiosity, and advancing social well-being. Thank you very much.
Thank you. President Khan.
Thank you. You know, there's no way back. We are experiencing very extreme climate change, pandemics, of which we are coming out of one. Who knows what's on the horizon? Political polarization that Chancellor Nusseibeh pointed out. There is no way back. And the only way forward is together. That is the only way we're going to supersede the conflicts in our region, supersede the divisions that separate us throughout the world. And we are the guides on this trip, this rocky journey that is not a simple one. We have to see ourselves as leaders and guides. We have the knowledge, and knowledge is power. And that is what should drive us forward as we first change our region and then change the world. So it is with great pleasure that I spent this time with you, Chancellor Nusseibeh, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Dr. Shahar Sadeh, you have led an excellent discussion Thank you to our wonderful audience who has provided us with excellent questions. And once again, let's wish our Muslim viewers Ramadan Kareem and peace on earth.
Thank you again. Thank you for everyone for your wonderful questions. On behalf of us as the JCRC New York, I want to thank the speakers for sharing their vision, analysis, wisdom, and thoughts with us. It was very hopeful, and many of the comments that we kept receiving were thank you for the uplifting of the spirits. I want to thank the University of Haifa and the UAE University for the beautiful collaboration, and thank all of you who joined us today. We hope to see you on the future JCRC event. Take care, and thanks again.
Thank you.